Parents who have genuinely stopped loving their child. What happened? I was 12 when I found the box in my mother's closet. Inside were ultrasound photos, hospital bracelets, and birthday cards, all for a child named Ethan. My name is Declan. I'd never heard of Ethan before. That night at dinner, I asked who Ethan was. My father's fork clattered against his plate. Mom's face went completely blank. "Where did you hear that name?" she asked quietly. I told her about the box. She stood up without a word and left the table. Dad followed. I heard their muffled argument through the bedroom door for hours. The next morning, Mom sat me down. Ethan was my older brother. He died in a drowning accident at a lake house when he was 7. I was born 11 months later. We needed something to hold on to, she explained. The grief was destroying us. I wanted to be understanding. I tried to be enough. But over the following years, I started noticing things. The way Mom would look at me sometimes. Not with love, but with disappointment. How she'd measure my height against marks on the doorframe that weren't mine. The photos displayed throughout the house. All of Ethan. None of me. Not a single school picture or birthday snapshot of mine hung anywhere. When I turned 7, the age Ethan had been, everything shifted. Mom started buying me clothes identical to ones Ethan wore in old photos. She'd call me by his name accidentally, then correct herself like she'd tasted something bitter. At my 8th birthday party, she decorated with a nautical theme, boats and anchors everywhere. Ethan had drowned. When I asked why, she said, "It's what he would have wanted." Dad tried to intervene, but Mom's obsession intensified. She enrolled me in swimming lessons, the same program Ethan had taken. When I expressed fear of deep water, she grew frustrated. "Ethan was fearless in the water," she'd say. "You need to overcome this." By age 10, I understood the truth they'd never say aloud. They hadn't wanted another child. They'd wanted Ethan back. I was supposed to be his replacement, but I had different interests, different fears, a different personality. Every difference was a failure. Every time I chose art over sports, books over swimming, quiet over confidence, I became less of what they'd lost and more of a reminder that he was gone. The final break came on what would have been Ethan's 16th birthday. Mom had baked his favorite cake, lemon with raspberry filling. She set 3 places at the table, one for Dad, one for her, one for the empty chair with Ethan's framed photo propped against it. There was no place for me. I stood in the doorway, watching them sing happy birthday to a ghost while I remained invisible. When they finished, Mom sliced the cake and placed a piece in front of Ethan's photo. Then she and Dad ate in silence, never acknowledging I existed. I packed a bag that night. Not much, just clothes, my phone, and the small amount of cash I'd saved from odd jobs. I left through my bedroom window at 2 a.m. and walked to the only place I could think of, my friend Bridger's house. His mom answered the door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without asking a single question. That was 3 months ago. I've been living with Bridger's family while Child Services investigates. My parents didn't report me missing for 5 days. When CPS asked why, Mom said she'd assumed I was staying with friends. She couldn't name a single one of them. Yesterday, my caseworker called. "We need to schedule a family therapy session," she said. "Your parents want you to come home. They say they're ready to work on things." I agreed to the meeting, not because I believed them, but because I found something else in that closet box. Something I haven't told anyone yet. Something that changes everything I thought I knew about Ethan's death. The thing I found was tucked beneath the birthday cards. A police report, folded so many times the creases had worn thin, I almost missed it. The paper was dated July 17th, 15 years ago, the day Ethan died. But that wasn't what made my hands shake. It was the witness statement, from my uncle, Dad's younger brother, Preston, the one who moved to Oregon right after Ethan's funeral, the one we never talk about, the one whose name makes Dad's jaw clench and Mom leave the room. According to the report, Preston had been at the lake house that day. He'd been watching Ethan while my parents ran to town for groceries. The statement was brief, clinical. Ethan had been playing on the dock. Preston had gone inside to take a phone call. When he came back out, Ethan was gone. They found him 20 minutes later. Too late. But there was something else. A handwritten note stapled to the back of the report. Detective's notes, it looked like. The handwriting was barely legible, like someone writing fast. It said, "Mother insists on reopening case. Father refuses. Brother left state. Closed due to lack of evidence. Accidental drowning. Mother insists on reopening case." Mom had wanted to investigate further. Dad had shut it down, and Preston had disappeared. I'd read that report 17 times in the past 3 months. I'd memorized every word, and I'd started asking questions, carefully, quietly, to people who might remember. Bridger's mom, Colette, was a local reporter. She'd covered Ethan's death back then. When I finally worked up the courage to ask her about it, her expression changed. She'd set down her coffee and looked at me for a long moment. "What do you want to know?" she'd asked. Everything they didn't tell me. She'd pulled out her old archives that night. 15 years of newspaper clippings saved on an external hard drive. We sat at her kitchen table until 3 a.m., reading through articles I'd never seen. The official story was consistent. Tragic accident. 7-year-old boy. Unsupervised for 10 minutes. Drowned in 8 feet of water. But there were inconsistencies Colette had noticed at the time. Details that didn't quite fit. Ethan was an advanced swimmer. He'd been taking lessons since he was 3. He'd passed all his safety courses. The instructor was quoted saying he was the strongest swimmer in his age group. The weather had been perfect that day. Calm water. No wind, visibility clear, and Ethan's life jacket was found, still hanging on its hook inside the lake house, dry. "Your mother fought to keep the investigation open," Colette had said. She insisted something wasn't right, but your father wanted it closed. He said prolonging it was making the grief worse, that they needed to move forward. What about Preston? I'd asked. Colette had hesitated. He left town 2 weeks after the funeral. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Your father told people he couldn't handle the guilt, but your mother told me something different. What did she say? She said Preston was lying, that his story didn't make sense, that a phone call shouldn't have taken 20 minutes. I'd started having nightmares after that. Dreams where I was drowning, where hands held me under, where I looked up and saw Preston's face through the water. Then I'd wake up and realize the hands looked like my own. The family therapy session was scheduled for next Tuesday, 3 days away. I'd convinced my caseworker, Rita, to let me bring something to the session, evidence I needed to discuss with my parents. She'd agreed without asking what it was. I hadn't told her about the police report, or Preston, or the questions I'd been asking. I'd called Preston myself last week. It had taken me 4 days to find his number. He lived in Portland now, worked as a contractor, never married, no kids. When he answered, I'd introduced myself. There was a long silence. Declan, he'd finally said. Jesus, how old are you now? 15. Does your father know you're calling me? No. Another silence. What do you want? I want to know what really happened to Ethan. He'd hung up, but he'd called back an hour later. This time he was crying. I've wanted to tell someone for 15 years, he'd said, but your father threatened me. Said if I ever spoke about it, he'd make sure I went to prison, and I believed him. Your dad knows people, important people. Tell me now, I'd said. I'm recording this. I won't let him hurt you. Preston had taken a shaky breath. I wasn't on a phone call that day. I was passed out drunk. I'd been drinking since morning. Your mother had caught me drinking around Ethan before. She told your father. He'd warned me to stay sober or never see you guys again, but I didn't listen. My stomach had turned. When I woke up, Ethan was gone. I panicked, started searching everywhere. I found him in the water, tangled in the boat rope. His foot was caught. He'd been trying to untie one of the boats. Must have slipped and gotten trapped. I pulled him out, but it was too late. You lied to the police. Your father made me. He said if I told the truth, it would destroy the family, that I'd go to prison for negligence, that your mother would never forgive me. He wrote out the statement and made me memorize it. Said it was better for everyone if it was just a simple accident. Mom knew you were lying. She suspected, but she had no proof. And your father convinced her that pursuing it would only cause more pain. He said I'd already left the state, that dragging me back would accomplish nothing, that Ethan was gone no matter what the truth was. Why are you telling me this now? Preston's voice had broken. Because I can't carry this anymore. Because your father chose his reputation over the truth. Because your mother never got closure. And because you deserve to know who your brother really was. Ethan was brave and adventurous and curious. He died trying to untie a boat so he could surprise us with his rowing skills. That's who he was. Not some careless kid who drowned playing around. I'd thanked him, told him I'd call again. Then I'd sat on Bridger's back porch and cried for an hour. Now it was Tuesday morning. Rita picked me up at 9 a.m. The therapy session was at 10 where we drove in silence. She kept glancing at the folder in my lap, the one containing the police report and the transcript of my call with Preston. Whatever you're planning, she said, remember that I'm there to protect you. If things get heated, I'll intervene. I need them to hear this, I said. I know. Just be prepared for their reaction. The therapist's office was in a medical building downtown. Dr. Lorraine Finch. She specialized in family trauma. The waiting room smelled like lavender. Supposed to be calming. It made my stomach worse. My parents were already there. Mom looked thin. She'd lost weight. Dark circles under her eyes. Dad looked the same. Suit and tie. Clean shaven. Expression neutral. When they saw me, Mom stood. She took a half step forward, then stopped. Like she wanted to hug me but didn't know if she was allowed. Declan, she said. I nodded. Didn't say anything. Dad stayed seated. Thank you for coming. Dr. Finch appeared in the doorway. Mid-50s. Kind eyes. Warm smile. Everyone's here. Wonderful. Let's head back. Her office was bigger than I expected. Soft lighting. Comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. A box of tissues on every surface. We sat. Rita beside me. My parents across from us. Dr. Finch to the side, positioned to see everyone. Thank you all for being here today, Dr. Finch began. This is a space for honest communication. Whatever is shared in this room stays in this room. The goal is to understand each other better and find a path forward. Who would like to start? Mom immediately looked at me. Declan, sweetheart, we've missed you so much. These past 3 months have been unbearable. We love you. We want you to come home. I stared at her. Do you? She blinked. Of course we do. You're our son. Am I? Or am I just a reminder of what you lost? Dad leaned forward. Declan, that's not fair. Isn't it? You didn't even notice I was gone for 5 days. We thought you needed space, Mom said. You'd been so distant. We assumed you were staying with friends. You couldn't name a single friend of mine when CPS asked. Silence. Dr. Finch intervened gently. Let's take a breath. Declan, can you help your parents understand what you've been feeling? I opened the folder. I found something in your closet 3 months before I left. A box with Ethan's things. That's when I learned I had a brother. Mom's face went pale. You never told me about him. I had to find out by accident. And then I started noticing everything. The photos, the clothes, the way you looked at me. Like I was disappointing you just by existing. That's not true, Mom whispered. Then why were there no pictures of me anywhere in the house? Why did you measure me against his height marks? Why did my birthday party have a drowning theme? Dad's jaw clenched. It wasn't a drowning theme. It was nautical. Ethan drowned, Dad. Boats and anchors at my birthday party? Really? Dr. Finch made a note. It sounds like there's been a lot of unprocessed grief in this family. Grief that's affected how everyone relates to each other. It's more than grief, I said. It's a lie. I pulled out the police report and set it on the coffee table between us. Mom recognized it immediately. Her hand flew to her mouth. Dad's expression darkened. Where did you get that? Does it matter? That was private. You had no right. I had every right. You told me Ethan drowned in an accident. You said it was quick, that no one was at fault. But that's not true, is it? Mom started crying. Quiet tears that she didn't wipe away. Dad stood up. This session is over. Sit down, Rita said. Her voice was steel. Your son has something to say. You're going to listen. Dad hesitated, then slowly sat. I looked at Mom. You wanted to reopen the investigation. You knew something was wrong, but Dad made you drop it. Why? She couldn't speak, just shook her head. I turned to Dad. Preston was drunk. Ethan got tangled in the boat rope and drowned while Preston was passed out. You covered it up, made Preston lie to the police, convinced Mom to let it go. That's not, Dad started. I talked to Preston last week. He told me everything. I have a recording. The room went silent. Even Dr. Finch looked shocked. Dad's face went red. You had no right to contact him. He's unstable. He's been making false accusations for years. He's not lying. I can hear it in his voice. He's been carrying this guilt for 15 years because you threatened him. You chose your reputation over the truth. Mom's crying got louder. You knew, she said, looking at Dad. All this time, you knew. I was protecting this family, Dad said. If the truth came out, it would have destroyed us. Preston would have gone to prison. We'd have been dragged through the media. For what? Ethan was already gone. Knowing the details wouldn't bring him back. I deserve to know, Mom said. Her voice was shaking. He was my son. And airing everything publicly would have helped how? It would have made us look like neglectful parents. Our friends, our community, they would have judged us. I made the only choice that protected our family. You made the choice that protected you, I said. You didn't want people knowing Preston was drunk on your watch. You didn't want questions about why you'd left Ethan with him. You cared more about what people thought than about the truth. Dad pointed at me. You don't understand how the world works. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. Sometimes you have to protect what matters most. What matters most? Ethan mattered most. And you turned him into a secret. Then you turned me into his replacement. We never tried to replace him, Mom said, but her voice was weak. Yes, you did. You dressed me like him, called me by his name, made me swim when I was terrified of water, put me in his room, measured me against his height, compared everything I did to what he did better. My voice cracked. You didn't want another kid. You wanted him back. And when I couldn't be him, you stopped loving me. Mom stood up abruptly. That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you. Then why did you serve birthday cake to his photo while I stood in the doorway? Why did you look through me like I was invisible? She opened her mouth, closed it. No answer came. Dr. Finch spoke quietly. It sounds like the grief from Ethan's death was never properly processed, and that grief has deeply affected this entire family. Declan, your feelings of being a replacement are valid, but I wonder if we can explore whether your parents' behaviors came from a place of unresolved pain rather than a lack of love. Does it matter? I asked. The result is the same. I grew up feeling unwanted, like a consolation prize for the child they actually loved. Dad rubbed his face. We didn't know how to handle it. Losing Ethan destroyed us. Then you came along and you were supposed to heal us. But you just reminded us of what we'd lost. Finally, truth. Mom grabbed his arm. Don't say that. It's how I felt, Dad said. I'm not proud of it. But seeing you grow up, watching you become your own person, it just highlighted all the ways you weren't Ethan. And I resented you for it. Not intentionally, not consciously, but I did. The room was dead silent. I think we need to pause here, Dr. Finch said. This is heavy material. Everyone needs time to process. No, I said. We're not done. I pulled out the printed transcript of Preston's call. Dad, you told Preston that if he ever spoke about what really happened, you'd make sure he went to prison. You threatened your own brother to keep him quiet. And Mom, you suspected the truth but let him convince you to drop it. You both chose the easy lie over the hard truth. And then you had me. Not because you wanted another child, but because you couldn't handle the grief. I stood up. I'm not coming home. I don't want to live with people who look at me and wish I was someone else. I don't want to be a ghost replacement for the rest of my life. Mom was sobbing now. Full, body-shaking sobs. Please, Declan, please, we can fix this. We can do better. Can you? I looked at her directly. Can you look at me and see me? Not Ethan. Not who you wish I was. Just me. Can you hang my photos on the wall without feeling like you're betraying his memory? She couldn't answer. That's what I thought. Rita stood. I think we should end the session here. Dad's voice was cold. You're 15 years old. You don't get to make this decision. Actually, Rita said, given the circumstances, Declan has made his position clear. The court will take his preferences into account. The court. Dad looked between us. What court? Bridger's family has filed for temporary guardianship, I said. With my support. We have the hearing next week. Dad's face went purple. You can't do that. We're your parents, biologically, but you stopped being my parents a long time ago. I walked to the door. Rita followed. Mom called after me, but I didn't turn around. In the parking lot, Rita touched my shoulder. Are you okay? Not really, but I will be. That took courage. What you did in there. It needed to be said. She drove me back to Bridger's house. Colette was waiting on the porch. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. I cried into her shoulder for the first time since leaving home. That night, I called Preston again. told him what happened. "Thank you," he said, "for telling the truth, even if it destroys what's left of your family." "It was already destroyed," I said. "At least now we're not pretending anymore." The custody hearing was the following Thursday. My parents showed up with a lawyer. Bridger's family had one too. Pro bono, provided by a family rights organization. The judge reviewed everything. The police report, Preston's statement, my testimony, the CPS investigation that showed my parents couldn't name my friends, my interests, or my teachers, the photos from their house showing 15 years of Ethan and none of me. When it was Mom's turn to speak, she stood. "Your Honor, I know I've made mistakes. I was drowning in grief and I handled it poorly. But I love my son. I want the chance to do better." The judge looked at her. "Mrs. Patterson, in your own words, can you tell me 3 things your son is passionate about?" Mom's face went blank. He likes art." "What kind of art?" "Silence." "What's his favorite book?" "Silence." "What does he want to be when he grows up?" Mom started crying. "I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know." The judge turned to Colette. "Ms. Reeves, can you answer those questions?" Colette smiled at me. "Declan loves charcoal drawing, especially portraits. His favorite book is The Catcher in the Rye, and he wants to be a counselor, to help kids who feel invisible." The judge made notes. "I'm granting temporary custody to the Reeves family for 6 months. During that time, the Pattersons will undergo mandatory family therapy. Declan will have supervised visits if and when he chooses. We'll reconvene in 6 months to reassess." Dad stood up. "This is ridiculous. He's our son. You can't just give him away." "Mr. Patterson," the judge said firmly, "a child is not property. Declan deserves to live in a home where he is seen, valued, and loved for who he is, not as a replacement for someone else. If you can demonstrate genuine change in 6 months, we'll revisit custody. Until then, this is my ruling." The gavel came down. I moved into Bridger's house officially that weekend. Colette helped me paint my new room. Not nautical theme, not matching Ethan's old room. I chose dark blue walls with white trim. I hung my own artwork, my sketches and charcoal drawings, not hidden away, on display. Bridger's little sister, Quinn, helped me organize my books. She was 9, talkative, curious, the opposite of how I'd been growing up. "Why did you leave your old house?" she asked while shelving my books. "Because I wasn't happy there." "Do your parents miss you?" "Maybe, in their way." "Do you miss them?" I thought about that. "I miss who I wanted them to be, but I don't miss who they actually were." She nodded like that made perfect sense. That night at dinner, Colette's husband Raymond asked how I was adjusting. "Better," I said. "This feels more like home than home ever did. You're family now," he said simply. "For as long as you need." Quinn raised her glass of juice. "To Declan being our brother now." Bridger groaned. "Don't get weird, Quinn." But he clinked his glass against hers, then against mine. I slept without nightmares that night, first time in months. The supervised visits with my parents started 3 weeks later, once a week, 2 hours, at Dr. Finch's office. The first visit was awkward. Mom tried to hug me. I let her, but didn't hug back. Dad kept his distance. They asked surface questions. "How's school? How's the new house? Do you need anything?" I answered briefly, then sat in silence. "This is harder than I thought," Mom admitted. "Did you think it would be easy?" I asked. "I thought you'd give us a chance." "I am giving you a chance. By showing up," Dr. Finch intervened. "Let's focus on the present moment, not on expectations or disappointments. What can each of you share about your week?" Mom talked about starting therapy, about unpacking Ethan's boxes, about taking down some of his photos. Not all of them. She wasn't ready for that, but some. Dad talked about work, safe territory, then admitted he'd called Preston. They'd talked for the first time in 15 years. "How did that go?" I asked. "He's angry, rightfully so, but we're trying to work through it." I apologized for threatening him, for making him carry that burden alone. What did he say? He said forgiveness takes time, but he appreciated me finally acknowledging the truth. It wasn't much, but it was something. By the 3rd visit, Mom brought a photo album, not of Ethan, of me. She'd apparently started putting one together, pictures I'd never seen. Me as a baby, first steps, first day of kindergarten, all stuffed in a box in the garage because she couldn't bear to display them. "Why couldn't you put these up?" I asked, flipping through. "Because every time I looked at you, I felt guilty, like I was betraying Ethan by loving you. Like if I let myself be happy with you, it meant I'd moved on from him, and I wasn't ready to move on. So you chose him over me. I chose grief over everything, including myself, including your father, including you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She was crying. Again. She cried every visit. I closed the album. Sorry doesn't fix 15 years. I know, but it's where I'm starting. Dr. Finch asked me how I felt hearing that. "Tired," I said honestly. "I'm tired of being the one who has to forgive, who has to understand, who has to make room for their grief. What about my grief? I lost a childhood. I lost parents who saw me. That's grief too." "You're right," Dr. Finch said. "Your grief matters equally. And it's okay to not be ready to forgive." Mom nodded. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, not yet. I'm just asking you to see that I'm trying." "I see it," I said. "I'm just not sure if trying is enough." The visits continued. Weekly. Slowly, patterns shifted. Mom started asking real questions. "What are you drawing? What music do you like? What makes you laugh?" At first, I gave short answers, testing whether she actually cared or was just performing for Dr. Finch, but she'd remember details. The next week, she'd reference something I'd said, or bring something related, a book by an author I mentioned, a sketch pad with better quality paper. Dad was slower to change. He struggled with vulnerability. with admitting how much he'd failed. But gradually, he started opening up about Ethan. Not the perfect version, the real one. The kid who had tantrums and fears and flaws. I put him on a pedestal after he died, Dad admitted during our 6th visit. Made him into someone he wasn't. And then I resented you for not living up to that impossible standard. Why? I asked. Because it was easier than facing my own guilt. I left Ethan with Preston that day, even though I knew Preston had a drinking problem. Your mother warned me, but I was in a hurry. I thought it'd be fine for a few hours, and it wasn't. So instead of accepting responsibility, I blamed Preston, silenced him, and then took out my guilt on you. It was the most honest he'd been in 15 years. That must have been heavy to carry, I said quietly. It destroyed me. I became someone I don't recognize, someone who prioritized image over truth, control over connection. I don't know how to undo that. Maybe you can undo it, I said. Maybe you just have to start building something new. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. By month 4, the visits felt different. Less like therapy assignments and more like actual conversations. We talked about Ethan, but not exclusively. We talked about my art, school, the future. Mom started asking if she could attend my art show at school. I hesitated, then agreed. She came alone. Dad was at work. She stood in front of my portrait series for 20 minutes. They were charcoal drawings of faces, each one expressing a different emotion I'd felt growing up. Invisible, forgotten, replaced, resigned. When I found her, she was crying. These are incredible, she said, and heartbreaking. Is this how you felt? Every day. I did this to you. You and Dad both. She nodded. You deserved better. You deserved to be seen, to be celebrated, to be loved without conditions or comparisons. Yes, I did. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at my artwork, at the evidence of my pain laid bare on the walls. I don't know, but maybe that's not the right question. What's the right question? Can we build something new? Without Ethan's ghost between us? Without you wishing I was him? She met my eyes. I'd like to try. Then stop crying at everything I show you. Stop apologizing constantly. Just be present. Ask questions. Show up. That's what I need. She wiped her eyes. I can do that. And slowly, she did. At the 6-month hearing, the judge reviewed the progress reports from Dr. Finch, the family therapy notes, my statements, my parents' statements. Declan, the judge said, you're 16 now, old enough to have a say in your future. What do you want? I looked at Bridger's family. They'd given me stability, safety, a place where I was chosen, not tolerated, where I was seen as myself, not compared to a ghost. Then I looked at my parents. They looked different, lighter somehow, like they'd finally set down something heavy. I want to stay with the Reeves family, I said, but I want to keep seeing my parents, weekly, without supervision. The judge nodded. And Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, are you in agreement? Dad stood. We are, Your Honor. We understand that we need to earn back our son's trust, and that might take years. We're committed to that process. Mom nodded. Whatever Declan needs, we'll respect his choices. The judge granted custody to the Reeves family until I turned 18, with open visitation rights for my parents. After the hearing, Dad approached me in the hallway. Thank you, he said, for giving us another chance. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it for me, because I don't want to carry your mistakes for the rest of my life, and because I want to know if you can actually change. That's fair. Mom handed me a box. These are for you, whenever you're ready. Inside were Ethan's belongings, the ones she'd kept hidden, but also new things. Photos of me, report cards, artwork from elementary school she'd saved, birthday cards she'd written but never given me. I'm not trying to dump Ethan's stuff on you, she said quickly, but I thought you might want to know him, the real him, not the perfect version we created. And I wanted you to see that I did save things of yours. I just couldn't look at them without feeling like I'd failed both of you. I took the box. I'll look through it when I'm ready. Take your time. There's no rush. We stood there awkwardly, not sure how to end this. Bridger appeared and saved me. Your mom's making celebratory tacos. We should go. I nodded. I'll see you both next week, I told my parents. We'll be there, Dad said. In Bridger's car, I set the box on my lap. Quinn poked it. What's in there? History, I said. The kind that needs sorting through. Sounds boring, she declared. Yeah, probably is. But that night, I opened it. Started going through Ethan's things piece by piece. His favorite toy car, a stuffed dog named Captain, his first grade report card, photos of him grinning at the camera. He looked happy, loved, alive. I found his journal. He'd kept one starting at age 6. The entries were messy, phonetic spelling, kid logic, but they painted a picture of a real child, not a perfect memory. He wrote about being scared of the dark, about fighting with our parents over eating vegetables, about wanting a little brother or sister, about loving swimming but hating when water went up his nose. He was a kid, just a kid, who died too young. I cried reading his journal, not because I missed him, I never knew him, but because I finally understood what I'd been competing with all these years. Not a real person, a myth, a perfect ghost that never existed. Ethan was flawed and scared and silly and brave, just like me, and he would have hated what our parents did, using him as a standard I could never meet, turning him into a weapon against my self-worth. I put the journal aside and picked up my own photos, baby pictures I'd never seen, birthday parties I barely remembered, evidence that I had existed, that I had been loved, at least in moments. Maybe that was enough to start from. The next day at school, my art teacher pulled me aside. Your portfolio is college-level work. Have you thought about applying to art programs? I hadn't. Art was private, personal, not something I'd considered as a future. I'm serious, she said. You have real talent. Schools would compete for you. That night, I brought it up at dinner. Colette immediately started researching programs. Raymond talked about scholarship opportunities. Bridger joked that he'd finally be the less talented brother. Quinn just said, "You should paint me sometime. I'd make a good model." For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not as Ethan's replacement, not as a disappointment, just as Declan, an artist, a student, a person with potential. At my next visit with my parents, I told them about considering art school. Mom's face lit up. "That's wonderful. Have you looked at any programs yet?" "A few. There's one in California that focuses on therapeutic art, helping people process trauma through creative expression." "That fits you perfectly," she said. Dad asked practical questions. Cost, location, job prospects, but not in a dismissive way, in a supportive way. "We want to help," he said, "if you'll let us. We have college savings set aside. It's yours, regardless of where things stand between us." "Why?" "Because you're our son, and we owe you at least this much. A future you choose, not one we impose." I didn't know what to say. "Thank you," felt insufficient, but it was all I had. Over the next year, things slowly normalized. I visited my parents weekly. Sometimes Bridger came, sometimes I went alone. We talked about surface things mostly, but occasionally we'd go deeper. Mom started her own art, painting. Bad at first, but she stuck with it. She said it helped her process emotions she'd buried for years. Dad joined a grief support group, started talking about Ethan in healthier ways, sharing memories without making him perfect, acknowledging the loss without letting it consume him. And me? I kept drawing, applied to 7 art programs, got into 6, chose the one in California that focused on art therapy. On my 18th birthday, both families threw me a party, the Reeves family and my parents, together. It was awkward, but also kind of beautiful. Mom gave me Ethan's sketchbook. I didn't know he'd drawn too. Inside were stick figures and wonky houses, a 7-year-old's art, but also a 7-year-old's dreams captured on paper. "He would have loved that you're an artist," Mom said. "He would have wanted you to have this." I flipped through the pages, saw his creativity, his imagination, his potential cut short. "Thank you," I said. "This means a lot." Dad gave me a key to the lake house. "We're not selling it. If you ever want to go, to remember, to heal, it's yours." I hadn't been back since that day 15 years ago. Neither had they. "Maybe someday," I said. "No pressure, just know it's there when you're ready." Before I left for college, I decided to visit the lake house, alone. I needed to see it without their memories clouding my perception. It looked smaller than the photos. The dock where Ethan died had been rebuilt, safety rails added, a life jacket hanging on every post. I sat at the edge and put my feet in the water. It was cold, still, peaceful. I thought about Ethan, about the life he didn't get to live, about the brother I never got to know, about the weight his death had put on our entire family. And I thought about forgiveness, not the kind where you forget, but the kind where you choose to stop letting the past poison your future. I couldn't forgive my parents completely. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I could move forward, build my own life, define myself outside of their mistakes. I pulled out my sketchbook and drew the lake. Not as a scary place where someone died, but as a peaceful place where water meets sky, where endings and beginnings blur together. When I finished, I left the drawing on the dock, weighted down with a rock so it wouldn't blow away. A gift for Ethan, proof that someone remembered him, not as a perfect ghost, but as a real kid who deserved to be honored for who he actually was. Then I drove back to pack for California. College was everything I'd hoped. Challenging, inspiring, completely my own. I made friends who didn't know my story, who saw me first without context or baggage. I dated someone for a few months. It didn't work out, but it was healthy, normal, the kind of experience I'd never had growing up. I called my parents weekly. The conversations got easier. We talked about my classes, their lives, slowly bridging the gap that had defined our relationship. During winter break, I came home, both homes, split my time between the Reeves family and my parents. It felt strange but right. On Christmas, we all had dinner together, both families. Quinn insisted on sitting next to me. Bridger made fun of my art school pretentiousness. Colette and Mom talked about community theater. Dad and Raymond discussed home improvement projects. For a moment, watching everyone interact, I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for what happened. The trauma and neglect were real, but for what came after. For the people who showed up when my parents couldn't. For the parents who eventually did the hard work of change. For the journey that made me who I was. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside. "Can I show you something?" She led me to their living room. The walls had changed. Ethan's photos were still there, but so were mine. My school pictures, my artwork, evidence of both of us, side by side. Brothers who never met but who'd both shaped this family in different ways. "I know it doesn't fix everything," she said, "but I wanted you to see that you're here. You're visible. You matter." I stared at the photos, saw myself at 8, 10, 15, 16, all the ages I'd felt invisible. "It's a start," I said. "I'll take a start." That night I slept in my old room. They'd changed it, repainted, new furniture, but they'd left my artwork on the walls, the pieces I'd done before leaving. I lay in bed, looking at my younger self's drawings, seeing the pain, the talent, the resilience, and I thought about the question that started all this. What happened when parents stopped loving their child? For my parents, they didn't stop loving me. They just loved their grief more. They loved their guilt more. They loved their perfect memories more, and in doing so, they neglected the real living child right in front of them. But love isn't static. It can die. It can grow. It can transform into something unrecognizable, and then back into something real. My parents' love had died, then slowly, painfully, come back to life in a different form. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real. And my love for them, it had died too, but it was also growing back. Tentative, guarded, but there, maybe that was the answer. Love isn't permanent. It requires work, attention, honesty. Without those things, it withers. And sometimes, it dies completely. But sometimes, if everyone is willing to do the brutal work of acknowledging the truth, it can be resurrected. Different, changed, but alive. I fell asleep thinking about that, about endings and beginnings, about ghosts and real people, about the brother I never knew and the person I'd become despite everything. In the morning, I found my parents in the kitchen. Dad was making pancakes. Mom was setting the table. They looked domestic, normal, almost peaceful. Morning, Mom said. Sleep okay? Yeah, actually I did. Good. We were thinking about going to the botanical gardens today. Would you want to come? Or do you have plans with Bridger? I'll come, I said. That sounds nice. And it was. We walked through the gardens, looked at winter plants, talked about nothing important, just existed together without the weight of the past crushing every moment. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward silences, moments where I saw Mom look at me with that flicker of sadness, times when Dad retreated into himself, but it was real. And for now, that was enough. That evening, I went to the Reeves house for dinner. Quinn had made a welcome home sign out of construction paper. Bridger had rented our favorite terrible horror movie. Colette had made her famous lasagna. How was the botanical garden? She asked while we ate. Good. Surprisingly okay. You seem lighter, Raymond observed. I feel lighter, like I'm not carrying as much. That's growth, Colette said. That's you healing. It's weird. I spent so long being angry, and I'm still angry, but it's not consuming me anymore. Anger is useful, Bridger said. It tells you when something's wrong, but at some point, you have to put it down or it becomes all you are. Quinn looked confused. Are we talking about feelings or backpacks? Everyone laughed. The moment broke. We moved on to other topics, but later that night, lying in Bridger's guest room that had become my second bedroom, I thought about what he'd said. I had put down some of the anger. Not all of it. I probably never would completely, but enough that I could breathe. Enough that I could imagine a future not defined by what my parents had done to me. That was something. I graduated college 4 years later. My parents came. So did the Reeves family. They sat in different sections, but both cheered when I walked across the stage. At the reception, Mom hugged me. A real hug. Not the tentative, guilty ones from before. I'm so proud of you, she said. Not because you're successful, but because you survived us and still became someone extraordinary. Dad shook my hand, then pulled me into an unexpected hug. Your brother would have loved you, he said. I know that doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know. How do you know? I asked. Because you're kind despite having every reason not to be. You're strong despite us trying to make you small. He would have been proud to call you his brother. It was the first time Dad had spoken about Ethan and me as brothers. Not replacement, not comparison, just brothers. I didn't cry. I was done crying over what could have been, but I appreciated him saying it. My art installation was featured in the student gallery that year, a series called Replacement Parts. It explored children born to fill a void, to fix a marriage, to replace a loss. Each piece was a portrait of a child with visible seams, like dolls stitched together from different parts. My parents came to the opening. They stood in front of my self-portrait for a long time. In it, my face was half mine, half Ethan's. The seam down the middle marked incomplete. This is how you saw yourself? Mom asked quietly. For a long time, yeah. And now? Now I'm working on a new series, about integration, about becoming whole even when you start fractured. I'd like to see that when it's done. You will. I got a job after graduation at a therapeutic arts center, working with kids who'd experienced trauma, teaching them to express pain through creativity instead of destruction. It was rewarding, hard, but rewarding. One day, a mother brought in her daughter. The girl was 13. She'd recently lost her older sister. The mother kept comparing everything the girl did to what the sister had done better. I saw myself in that girl's eyes, the same exhaustion, the same resignation, the same invisible fracturing of self. I worked with her for 6 months, teaching her that she wasn't a replacement, that she was allowed to be her own person, that grief didn't justify making her small. When she finally smiled during a session, genuinely smiled while painting something that was wholly hers, I felt something shift in me. This was why I'd survived. Not just to heal myself, but to help others who were drowning in the same water I'd almost drowned in. I called Mom that night. I forgive you. Silence. What? I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. Not because everything's fixed, but because I don't want to carry this anymore. I forgive you for not seeing me, for making me invisible, for choosing grief over your living child. I forgive you. She was crying. Thank you. God, Declan, thank you. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me, but you can have it anyway. Does this mean? It doesn't mean everything's perfect. It doesn't erase what happened, but it means I'm choosing to move forward without the weight of your mistakes crushing me. I'll take that. I know you will. We talked for an hour, really talked, about her therapy, about Dad's progress, about their decision to volunteer at a grief support group for parents who'd lost children. We tell them not to make the mistakes we made, she said. We tell them about you, about how we almost lost both our children because we couldn't let go of the first. It's the least we can do. That's good. Kids need to hear that. We're also working with Preston. He's in therapy too, dealing with the guilt and anger from everything. How's he doing? Better. He's engaged, actually, to someone who knows the whole story and loves him anyway. We're invited to the wedding. Are you going? We are. He deserves our support, even if we don't deserve his forgiveness. After we hung up, I sat on my apartment balcony. The city lights stretched out below. I thought about how far I'd come from that 12-year-old finding a box in his mother's closet. I'd gone from invisible to visible, from replacement to whole person, from victim to survivor, to someone who could help others survive. That was my story. Not the story of a child unloved, but the story of a child who learned to love himself despite being unseen, who built a family from people who chose him, who forced his original family to confront their failures, and who ultimately chose forgiveness not out of weakness, but out of strength. 5 years later, I published a book, part memoir, part therapeutic guide, The Replacement Child, Finding Yourself When Born to Fill a Void. It was successful, more than I expected. I did interviews, workshops, helped create support groups for children in similar situations. My parents came to every book event in our state. They sat in the back, listened to me tell our story publicly, never interrupted, never made it about them. After one event, a woman approached them. "You're his parents, aren't you?" They nodded. "How do you handle hearing him talk about what you did?" Dad answered. "We listen, we witness. We accept that this is the consequence of our actions, and we're grateful he survived us well enough to help others." Someone recorded that exchange and posted it online. The video went viral, people debating whether my parents deserved redemption, whether forgiveness was earned or given. I didn't engage with the debate. I'd made my peace. What others thought didn't matter. But I did call my parents after. "I saw the video. We should have been more private," Mom said. "We didn't mean to make things harder for you." "You didn't. You told the truth. That's all I've ever wanted." "Still, your story is yours to tell, not ours to comment on. You're part of the story. You get to have a response. Just don't make yourself the victim in it." "We won't. We promise." I believed them, not because they were perfect, but because they'd proven over 10 years that they could change. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely. At 30, I got married to someone who knew my whole story, who loved me not despite my past, but because of how I'd transformed it into purpose. Both families came to the wedding. My parents, the Reeves family, Preston and his wife, friends from college and work. During my vows, I talked about chosen family, about the people who see you when you're invisible, who build you up when you're broken, who love you not for who they want you to be, but for who you are. I looked at the Reeves family when I said it. They'd saved me, but I also looked at my parents, because they'd taught me something too. That love can die and be resurrected, that people can change if they're willing to do the brutal work, that forgiveness is possible even when you thought it never would be. After the ceremony, Mom pulled me aside. She handed me a small box. Inside was a photo, Ethan and me, digitally created. A composite of our faces at the same age, smiling together like brothers. "I know he's not here," she said, "but I wanted you to have this. A version where you both existed together, where you could have known each other. It's not real, but it's what should have been." I stared at the photo, saw what we could have been. Two brothers, growing up together. No comparisons, no grief, just normal siblings. "Thank you," I said. "I'll treasure this. I know I can't give you back your childhood. I can't undo the pain, but I can give you this. A glimpse of what should have been possible if I'd been stronger." I hugged her. A real hug. "You're stronger now. That counts for something." I hope so. That night, dancing at my reception, surrounded by people who loved me, I realized something. I'd spent years feeling like an incomplete person, a replacement part cobbled together from someone else's design. But I wasn't incomplete. I was whole. Scarred, yes, marked by trauma, but whole. I was Declan, not Ethan's replacement, not my parents' second chance, just Declan, an artist, a therapist, a husband, a friend, a survivor who'd become more than his survival, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.